Where would we be without the various products delivered by the men and women in the trucking industry? Healthy Conversations in Trucking podcast is a platform for professional long-haul truck drivers to share their journeys over the road, educating listeners about the trucking industry and lifestyle. Now, let's dive into the conversation on this brand new episode. Greetings, everyone. It's just you and me today. I'm Dr. Charlotte Huntley. I am so excited that you've joined me on this episode of the podcast. I'm recording it with video this time and audio. So if you're listening in the regular format on our website or through the podcast app, just know that I've recorded a video version of this as well that you may find on one of our social media channels. And if you're just finding us through our brand new social media channel, then welcome. Either way, I've got it covered from audio perspective and the video perspective. So let me introduce myself to you. I'm going to be reminding you on this episode of the reason for the podcast, and then I'm going to give you 5 reasons that you should be a guest on the podcast. Now, although there are so many other reasons beyond 5, I've chosen my 5 favorite to focus on. All right. So I'm your host, Dr. Charlotte Hughes Huntley, and I am a public health epidemiologist. I have over 20 years of experience in healthcare and in public health. I have another podcast. I'm the host and producer of the Public Health Epidemiology Conversations podcast, which I started back in 2017. So I've produced a brand new episode every single Tuesday since 2017. So at the time of this recording, I have over 243 episodes published already. Well over that because we have several bonuses that I didn't assign a number to. They're just bonus episodes. So at any rate, I'm really proud of that. I encourage professionals on that podcast who are in the public health field to think outside the box, to think more creatively about how we address public health issues. So I have a heart for trucking, the trucking industry from both a professional and a personal perspective. So that has everything to do with why I'm here with this podcast, getting started and promoting it and getting it growing and trying to reach so many people. Over the last decade, I've been a trucker's wife while still wearing my epidemiologist hat. So I'm still a researcher trying to serve in this industry in a way that supports the health of the professional men and women in trucking. So this is my creative expression, my creative way to reach this community and serve in a lot of different ways, which I'll share a bit more as we talk today. That's really what I'm here about. I'm going to give you the 5 reasons why I think you should be a guest on the podcast. So just in sharing each of these 5 reasons, you'll get a little bit more of my why. You'll be able to hear it in there. I guess just to be clear, to be a guest, what we are really looking to do on this podcast is highlight the stories of the men and women in trucking over the road. So we are specifically looking to speak with truck drivers who are over the road, long haul truck drivers. So it doesn't matter what you're hauling, but it does matter that you're over the road. So those are the voices that we're looking to highlight. So let me click over here. I'm gonna get a little fancy for me at least. So just so you remember the title for as we go through this, and if for anybody's popping in and out, they'll know clearly. And this goes for the folks that are watching the video, not so much the people that are in the audio format only, because you can't see what I have across my screen. So that's, I guess, a little bit of the disadvantage of not having the video there as well. So my 5 reasons. So if you decide at any point you're listening to me that you want to be a guest, it's really super easy. If you visit our website, which is healthyconversationsinTrucking.com, or we made it really easier, HCITpodcast.com will also take you straight to our website. From our website, you can click on the menu where it says be a guest, and that walks you through the steps of getting scheduled so that you can be a guest on. We'll have a conversation and I'll get to know you and record that. And then we do all the work. You just show up, schedule a time, show up and meet with me. And it's through a phone call or a video call if you happen to not be driving and you want to do video. But that's it. It's that simple. Go to our website, click on be a guest, and you can, it'll take you right through all the steps to be a guest on our our podcast. I encourage you to do so. This is definitely not a time to feel shy about sharing your story or what's all involved. It is easy. It is very much a conversation where you and I will get to know each other. I will get to learn about what you do. And you may think it's maybe not that big of a deal. I happen to think it's a big deal. And I think a lot of people who listen really do want to learn more about the industry. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I just want to say that if this is an incredible opportunity for this podcast to really be grown and filled with stories of the men and women who are actually doing the work, not other people trying to interpret what the men and women over the road are doing. So please do take advantage of that. All right. So here, in no specific order, okay, my first reason that I think you should be a guest on the podcast is that it will raise awareness of the profession. There are so many people who just don't know what is involved with the trucking industry, with the men and women who are over the road, myself included. I have learned so much because of my husband being in this profession. And I learned so much because of all the people I've met through him, as well as the time that I've spent researching. So I met a lot of people doing research. I don't know, some of you may even be familiar. Back in the day when I was conducting my research for my doctorate, I gathered a community of, I want to say about 200 men and women in trucking at that time who helped me by participating in a survey that I had and the research that I was doing. So I learned a lot about the industry, and I'm still learning. Even in this short period of time that I've been interviewing people for the podcast, every single interview I host, I learn something new. So I'm excited to share that on the podcast with other people who are both in the industry, because if you're in the industry and you only do you haul one type of product, then you may be really interested in hearing about what others are doing who haul something different from you or something that you haven't done, or maybe they travel in an area that you haven't traveled. So I think that raising awareness of the profession is a huge benefit of being a guest. You sharing your story might encourage someone who's thinking about going into trucking. They may decide that they can do it, especially speaking to the women now. There may be more women that are interested, but they have questions like myself. I have so many questions. I look forward to more of the women that I'll be speaking with on the podcast in the coming weeks. But sharing your story helps other women decide, well, maybe I can do this. If she's doing it and she's loving it for all the reasons, they feel encouraged and inspired to be able to do it. So that's one reason. Raising awareness of the profession is a great reason to be on our show. All right, here's number 2. Increased respect for the industry. And what I mean by this is it kind of goes along with what I said about raising awareness, but it gives you sharing your story humanizes the industry. Does that make sense? What I mean is, each individual has an individual story. Everyone has something different to say. It's your perspective. It's your experience. And when you are just sharing, why you decided to come into the industry, how long you've been driving, what you like about it, what you don't like about it, what your challenges are and how you're addressing them. When you share those things on the podcast, it is the human story. It is such people connect with stories. People will be drawn to what you do and can now see truck drivers and trucking industry in a whole new light. I can imagine how others might feel. I know for myself, driving, I always love road trips. So driving on the road with trucks, I didn't give a whole lot of thought about what was in those trucks, where they were going, even the people who were driving or what was involved with that drive. I never really gave much thought to that before I met my husband, even though I knew other people that were in trucking. Until I really got to know more about the industry and the people behind the wheel, I just didn't know that much about it. So you telling your stories, your unique stories and perspective really brings a lot of, we all love stories. We can relate to stories, but it just increases the respect for the industry. If we wait till just what is, shared across the media or the bad stories or the negative stories or the problems that arise, then we don't really get to hear and connect with the men and women in those individual perspectives to increase the respect. And that's one of my goals for this podcast in presenting these stories the way that I do, is to help increase the respect for the industry overall. So that's your second reason, or my second favorite reason. for being a guest on the podcast. You help to, help us accomplish that goal. Again, sharing your personal story. Like I said, everyone's story is different. In the beginning of the podcast, we have so many car haulers. And even though there's so many different car haulers, so many car haulers are all different. And I could have a show just with car haulers, and then all the stories are going to be different. All the examples are going to be different. There are going to be so many similarities, but so many differences as well. So everybody's story, every journey, every reason that you decided to go into trucking is different from your colleague's reason for going into trucking. So all of that is what enriches the show and adds that special quality. So it's another reason to be a guest on the podcast, to be able to share your individual, unique story. All right, here's my number 4. Again, not in any special order. They just seem to flow in this way. So it doesn't mean that they're increasingly more important. It's just my reason. So number 4 is the opportunity to learn. I'm going to tell you, I definitely enjoy learning something new. It's an intellectual challenge. I think it's just kind of nice. I'm always that way. Something new. It's like, something to think about. Every interview I've had, I've learned something new. I've heard from people who are listening to these episodes, even the truck drivers, are saying, I didn't know about that, or I never thought about it that way. So there's something new for everyone. There's something to be learned from our stories. Again, these are unique perspectives and stories. So I think it's just an incredible opportunity to learn from the inside, within the trucking industry. You all as truck drivers can learn from each other, but all of us that are not truck drivers, that are just interested and curious about the industry, this is an opportunity to learn, and to learn from the men and women who are actually over the road doing the work. That's a whole different view, that we're actually learning from those of you who stand up and share your story, speak out and say, I'm going to answer those questions, and I'm going to chat with you and tell you what my reasons are for being in this industry. And it's an incredible opportunity for all of us to learn from each other. So that's one of my favorite reasons for being a guest on my show. And here's my number 5. Okay, it's hard for me to say my number 5 without getting a little preachy. So that's just my disclaimer there. But there is a lot of power in our collective voices. So if you are, let's just use the example of some of the health challenges. So when I ask the question, what is your biggest health related challenge? And many of you will say, I don't want to bias you in case you're thinking, I don't want to tell you what I want you to say or anything like that. But whatever your health related challenge is, the more people I speak to, the more I hear from individuals what your challenges are and how you're addressing it. There's a lot of power in those collective voices. So as, very much the scientist, I'm thinking and I'm listening to everyone. If there's something that I hear, then I'm in a position to take some of those collective voices. If I'm saying I'm hearing a lot of this on the podcast, and I can take that back to my industry, back to my colleagues, and there is a lot of power in your voices. You may not feel like your individual voice has that much power, although it does. You may not feel like you have that much power, but when you become a part of the voices on the podcast, then there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot that we can do, not just in like addressing a problem, but sometimes in highlighting something that is really going so well. When we hear about I ask you all the same questions. So when I ask you, what's your favorite part of what you do? What do you love most about being on the road? I can take those collective positive answers. And that's a collective voice of the reason, advocating for this industry and for all the reasons you love it. That can go into enhancing training programs or enhancing the experience at companies that you work for people that first start working or transfer to another company. Sometimes that collective positive voice can be something that enhances something that you already like. So we won't know how much this plays until we really start to have a large number of guests, and we who truly have a lot of voices on the podcast that we can really speak to these, the power of collective voices. But right now, it's sort of the potential for this is definitely on this podcast. So those are some of my reasons. Let me recap really quickly. Number one is, these are my five favorite reasons why you should be a guest on this podcast. Raising awareness of this profession, increased respect for the industry, sharing your personal story, the opportunity to learn both within the trucking industry, individuals, as well as those of us who are not in the trucking industry, but we're curious, we want to learn. And then the number 5 reason is the power, or maybe the potential power for our collective voices. So that is yet to be seen, because the podcast is still early and new. This is, episode 13 that I'm recording right now, but there is that potential there. I do see it. So I do encourage you, if you are an over-the-road truck driver, to take action. I love action takers. So take action now by just visiting healthyconversationsinTrucking.com, or for short, HCITpodcast.com, and click on Be a Guest from the main menu, and it'll walk you through all the steps, the simple steps to be able to sit down with me and have a conversation where you can then be a part of this podcast. So that was easy, right? Super, super easy. I like to think that it was easy. Thank you for joining me. And until next time, have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for listening to the Healthy Conversations in Trucking podcast. Learn more or be a guest on a future episode by visiting healthyconversationsinTrucking.com or simply HCITpodcast.com.